So, so welcome to this UPSC practice workshop, where we are going to make you to practice the topics related to the quality and the general essay, ethics, CSAT, current affairs, and previous year questions based on these dimensions. So this practice is based on a question paper and previous year questions, more particularly. So how the questions have been asked earlier, and how we have to handle the questions, and how we have to study the fundamental subject and thereby handling the questions, answer writing, and also developing the ability to guess the questions. This is the objective of this workshop. So this ability to guess the questions, meaning how you can expect the questions, because UPSC is considered as an unpredictable public service commission, though it is Union Public Service Commission. So the reason we considering this to be unpredictable, it is most of the questions are unpredictably given. But however, if you decode the question papers of the past 40 years of the UPSC, certain fundamental conceptions that can be developed. So basically, we have two levels of examination, prelims and the mains. Mains having another two dimensions, that is the written test and the oral test, the personality test in fact. So more or less the core subject in the prelims and the core subject in the mains are common. The core subjects in the prelims and the mains is the polity, economy, history, geography, environment, and science and technology. These are common between the prelims and the mains. Of course, the weightage of the questions is different in both the prelims and the mains. And despite difference in the weightage, but the subject is common. And how to study these things? In the prelims, the questions are completely based on the fundamentals, that is, the facts. And in the mains, the questions are based on the descriptive analysis. The fact is required, and that fact has to be analyzed. Now, what is the fact and its analysis? Suppose recently the presidential election is held, and in the preliminary examination, based on the presidential election, you can get a question asking you to identify certain fact, right and wrong statements. So, for example, the election of the president is based on the proportional representation is a statement given, and you will be asked to identify whether it is a right statement or wrong statement. So it is based on the proportional representation. It's a right statement. Second statement will be given saying that in the election of the president, people participates. Is a wrong statement, because the presidential election will be the participants in the election of the president will comprise of the members of the electoral college, who are the elected MPs and elected MLAs. And the elected MPs includes both the members of the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. Only the elected MPs, not the nominated MPs in the Rajya Sabha. So these are the facts. And these facts can be given in the preliminary examination. While in the mains, you will be asked a question. What representation is adopted for India for the election of the president? You will be expected to find out the reasons for that, and merits and demerits of that, the advantages of proportional representation, disadvantages of proportional representation, or the procedure of election of the president having implications to the Indian political system. Otherwise, you may be given a question like, why the president is the post of the president is nominal post. Why not the president is a real executive? Why the president is a nominal executive? This why and the analysis related to the merits and demerits are based on the the analysis part. The fact is the fundamental subject related fact is given in the prelims. Suppose some of the questions given here. like they are saying that constitutional government means, the first question is saying, it's a question that was given in 2021. The constitutional government means the representative government of a nation with a federal structure. A government whose head enjoys the real powers. A government whose head enjoys the nominal powers. A government limited by the terms of the constitution. So there are the various statements where you have to identify the factual statement related to the meaning of the constitutional government. So a constitutional government is defined in terms of these different options. So it's a representative government of a nation with federal structure, is not the definition. The half of the statement is saying representative government means parliamentary government of a nation with a federal structure is a wrong statement. It's a definition of the parliamentary government with a federation. Second statement is saying that a government whose head enjoys the real powers and a government whose head enjoys the nominal powers. Taking together this A and B and C, they are the elements of the parliamentary form of government. The fourth statement, a government limited by the terms of the constitution. A government with limited powers, a government with limited rights, restricted rights, is the constitutional government, which is known as the constitutionalism. Administration of a country, if it is run by the rules and regulations and the constitutional provisions, the government will have restricted powers, restricted authorities. So thereby it's a government limited by the terms of the constitution is the answer. Where do you find this question? You don't find the answer to this question in the Lakshmikant Indian polity book. You'll find the answer to this question in the NCERT books. From the NCERT, it is directly lifted. The definition of the constitutional government is being directly lifted. So the tendency of the UPSC is that the questions will be directly given from the NCERT. So you need to focus on the NCERT questions fundamentally. And so that is how you learn the things from the NCERT basically. Then second question is this: what was the exact constitutional status of India on 26th January 1950? So because this particular question is based on the preamble of the Indian Constitution. So as the preamble of the Indian Constitution is declaring that Indian Constitution is a sovereign democratic republic in 1950. Today it is standing as Indian Constitution is a sovereign, secular, socialist democratic republic. So originally in 1950, how India was? Originally in 1950, India was declared as a sovereign democratic republic. Only three words. That is the answer B. Answer B is the correct answer there. And sovereign secular democratic republic is only a partial truth. And sovereign social secular democratic republic, that is the option D, is after 42nd Amendment. 42nd Amendment has incorporated two words, and those two words were socialism and secularism. So after incorporation of these two words in 1976 by the 42nd Amendment, Indian constitutional status stands as sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. But going by the question given by the examiner, so the question is saying Indian constitution in 1950 is described as a sovereign democratic republic. So answer is B, sovereign democratic republic. B is the answer to that. And if you look at the third question, with reference to the Indian judiciary, what can be the true statement? A retired judge of the Supreme Court of India can be called back to sit by the Chief Justice of India with prior permission of the President of India. A High Court in India has the power to review its own judgment, as the Supreme Court does. So the statement number 2 is known as the Court of Record. So Court of Record, that is, the court will record its judgments. the court records its judgment, it implies that the court would review its own judgment also. But lower courts cannot review the judgments of the superior courts. A judgment given by the Supreme Court cannot be reviewed by the High Court. A judgment given by the High Court cannot be reviewed by the District Court. So lower court have no power to review the judgments given by the higher courts. If they do so, it would be considered as a contempt of court. And if the lower court recourses to the contempt of court, that would amount to a punishment. Punishment imposed by the higher court over the lower court. And that would attract the punishment ranging between up to 6 months imprisonment to a simple imprisonment to a fine of rupees 2,000. Under the 1971 Contempt of Court Act, 1971, the Parliament has enacted this law called Contempt of Court Act. So under the Contempt of Court Act, 1971, anybody who violates and the breaches the judgments of the higher courts would be supposed to be imposed with the punishment, and that punishment ranging can be up to 6 months imprisonment and a fine up to 2,000 rupees can be imposed. Supreme Court can impose the punishments over the High Court judges. High Courts can impose the punishments over the lower court judges, if they give any judgment against the judgment given by the High Court. And that is made possible because of the court of record power. And this court of record power is there for both the Supreme Court and the High Court. So second statement stands right. And first statement is any retired judge of the Supreme Court under Article 128 of the Constitution provides that the Chief Justice of India, with the prior consent of the President, with the prior approval of the President, can request any retired judge of the Supreme Court or High Court to act as a judge of a Supreme Court for a temporary period, if there is a piling up of the cases in the Supreme Court. Suppose in India, at present, in the Supreme Court, nearly 70,000 cases are pending. One of the reasons for the pending cases is the pandemic. So during the pandemic period, the number of cases to be resolved by the Supreme Court has become slower. And after almost more than 3 months, the Supreme Court did not work. After 2-3 months, the Supreme Court worked only online. Even if it was working online, the disposal rate of the Supreme Court is very minimum. Disposal of the cases rate was very minimum. Hence, there was a piling up of the cases to the extent of 70,000. And across the country, in all the courts together, there was a pending of almost 4 crore cases. And so many cases are pending in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can ask a retired judge of the Supreme Court to sit as the judge of the Supreme Court with the prior approval of the President of India. And that is how the statement 1 is correct as well as statement 2 is correct. So in the fourth question, so which one of the following categories of fundamental rights incorporates protection against untouchability as a form of discrimination? So that is right against exploitation, right to freedom, right to constitutional remedies, and right to equality. Very simple. This question is asking you to identify under which right untouchability is prohibited. So usually we study in that pattern. Untouchability is prohibited under Article 17. And Article 17 comes under the group of Article 14 to 18. And Article 14 to 18 is related to the right to equality. So all these questions are based on the NCERT. So at 21st century, we are actually focusing first on, for the foundation, for the fundamental foundation of the candidates, a focus on the NCERT studies. 2 months to 2 to 3 months, we will focus mostly on the NCERT only, because 80% of the questions in the prelims are based on the NCERT. 80% of the questions, because the prelims questions are based on the fundamentals, basics, but only the questions are twisted, that's all. The questions are twisted, and question you will be expected to identify the right statement and the wrong statement. The right statement is given as a wrong statement and the wrong statement is given as a right statement. And you will be expected to identify which is right and which is wrong. And one such NCERT question is also this. So under the right to equality, that the untouchability is prohibited. Discrimination on grounds of untouchability is prohibited. So answer is D. And the fifth question, with reference to the provisions contained in the Part 4 of the Constitution. So Part 4 of the Constitution means directive principles of state policy. Which of the following statements is correct? So what are the statements correct with reference to the directive principles of state policy? So even this question is also based on the NCERT only. With a fundamental approach to the NCERT, we can identify the answer to this question. That is, they shall be enforceable by the courts. Directive principles are enforceable by the courts. They shall not be enforceable by any court. The principles laid down in the past, in this part, are to influence the making of laws by the state. So, among these three, only two statements should be correct, because one or two statements are contradicting with each other. So, there must be only one statement would be correct between these two. So, suppose when you look at the Part 3 of the Constitution, Part 3 of the Constitution contains the fundamental rights, and Part 4 of the Constitution comprises of the directive principles. Fundamental rights are the rights of the individual. Directive principles are the rights of the society. The rights enjoyed by the society as a whole. So these fundamental rights are justiciable in nature. Fundamental rights, according to Article 13, are justiciable in character. Justiciability means in case of the breach of any fundamental right, in case of the deprival of any fundamental right by the state, the citizen has the right to move to the Supreme Court. So when you have the right to move to the Supreme Court by issuing the writs will protect the rights of the people. That is the justiciable nature of the court, justiciable nature of the fundamental rights. While in the Article 37 of Part 4, Article 37 of Part 4 of the Constitution, that is the directive principles, it is clearly mentioned that they are not justiciable. Directive principles are not justiciable. So they cannot be enforceable by the courts. The government will implement them, subject to the availability of the resources. So they have to be, this principle laid down in this part are influencing the making of the laws by the state, based on the law enacted by the state, that the directive principles are enforceable. So only 1 and 3 are correct. They shall be enforceable, 2 and 3 are correct. They shall not be enforceable by any court, because they are not justiciable under Article 37. The principles in this part are to influence the making of the laws by the state. That the government will take these things into consideration in enforcing the policies and in making the laws. Laws enacted by the Parliament in the Union, laws enacted by the assemblies at the state level. That both central government and state governments would consider these directive principles of state policy while making the policies and the laws. So even these conditions, these statements are also taken directly from, what you call the NCERT. Then the sixth question. Consider the following statements. The Constitution of India defines its basic structure in terms of federalism, secularism, fundamental rights, and the democracy. The second statement, the Constitution of India provides for the judicial review to safeguard the citizens' liberties and to preserve the ideas on which the Constitution is based. So, which of these two statements are correct? So, correct statement, you have been given the combinations 1 and 2. One only, two only, both 1 and 2, and neither 1 or 2. So, these are the statements in one. And even this is also taken from the, these are all the questions given by the UPSC from the UPSC previous year questions. Whatever the polity questions we are discussing here, they are all previous year questions from 2020, 21 and 22. So the Constitution of India defines the basic structure. Is a wrong statement. So it is a wrong statement because there is no definition of the basic structure in the entire Constitution. Even the word basic structure is not found in the Constitution. Basic structure is a term that was coined by the Supreme Court only in its judgments, but it is not incorporated into the Constitution of India. Both Parliament and the Executive are against the concept called basic structure. So the government is not actually accepting this idea called basic structure. It is only the judiciary that has taken the idea of basic structure, influenced by the Pakistan Supreme Court. The idea of basic structure for the first time originated in the world in Pakistan Supreme Court. So from this practice of Pakistan Supreme Court called the basic structure, what is that basic structure means to? Basic structure implies anything that is fundamental in character, any element of the Constitution, any element, any feature of the Constitution which is fundamental to the Constitution is known as the basic structure. Just like a human being will have a basic structure, a face, two hands, two legs. And similarly, anything will have a basic structure, including the Constitution. So that basic structure should not be violated when the Parliament is amending the Constitution. So while amending the Constitution, this basic structure should not be affected. This is the idea behind the concept of basic structure that was proposed by the Supreme Court in 1973 in a case called Keshavaranda Bharati case. So after this 1973 Keshavaranda Bharati case, the Supreme Court is extensively using the concept of basic structure in various cases across different situations. So the concept of basic structure is only a jurisprudential concept. It is not a parliamentary legislative concept, or it is not incorporated into the Constitution. It is only based on the interpretation of the Supreme Court. The idea has been adopted in the Indian jurisprudential history, not in the constitutional direct history. So you will not find neither find neither the word basic structure nor the concept of basic structure or the list of basic structure within the Constitution. So this is the fact. What is the fact? The basic structure is not there in the Constitution. Is the fact. And we are expected to identify whether it is true or not. The option given is basic structure is defined in the Constitution, but actually there is no definition as such. So you have found that it is a wrong statement. And the same statement with a true statement will be given in the names. Basic structure is not a part of the Constitution. Comment. Basic structure is not a part of the Constitution. Comment. So where you have to write the basic background related to the basic structure. What is basic structure? Then followed by in which case for the first time the idea of basic structure is being presented. Therefore we have borrowed. Then why it is not a part of the Constitution? Because it is not accepted by the government or the Parliament. So there was no incorporation of the idea of basic structure in the entire Constitution anywhere. Then what it is? It is only a concept that is defined by the Supreme Court, interpreted by the Supreme Court based on the fundamental nature of the Constitution. And what should be the way forward? There is a need for incorporating the basic structure in the Constitution with a proper definition. So that would rationalize the Constitution and the idea of basic structure more properly. So this is the explanatory part given in the mains. In the preliminary exam, you are given only a statement and you will be expected to identify whether it is right or wrong. So God is when you are asked to identify in which case that the Supreme Court has proposed the idea of basic structure. Those questions were already asked. And what is left for the UPSC to ask is to identify whether it is a part of the Constitution or not. And that is also being asked in the preliminary exam 2021. And now in the mains implication, what is the implication for the mains from this statement? Basic structure is not a part of the Constitution. Comment would be the question. why it is not a part of the constitution, how judiciary is considering it as a part of the constitution. So those argumentations have to be written in just a span of 200 words. So the second statement, Constitution of India provides the judicial review under Article 13. Under Article 13 and 32 together, judicial review is provided to safeguard the citizens' liberties and to preserve the ideas on which the Constitution is based. So in the Article 13 and 32, the implication of these two articles together is judicial to protect the liberty of the people. That is the rights of the people. So for the protection of the rights of the people, judiciary can review the laws enacted by the parliament and can declare them invalid. And thereby, further under Article 32, the judiciary can also issue the writs. The court can issue the writs for the protection of the fundamental rights. So this is how different dimensions of the questions in the polity paper are being given across various parts of the Constitution. Most important areas in the Constitution are concerned with preamble, features of the Constitution, salient features of the Constitution, fundamental rights, directive principles, fundamental liberties. These part 1 to part 4A, they are all important for the examiner very much. Then in the part 5 and 6, we have the government related topics, that is union government and state government. Questions may be asked even from there, but most of the questions are related to this fundamental rights and directive principles, preamble and the nature of the Constitution. And the examiner can ask a couple of questions even from the local governments. So most importantly in the governmental section, there are three topics, union government, state government and the local governments. Among the three levels of the government, the examiner gives more importance to the union government and the local government. Even within the local government also more importance is given by the examiner for the Panchayat Raj institutions. Most of the questions in the local government so far have been asked from the Panchayat Raj institution, not from the municipalities. And in the Indian government also, the most focus was given to the parliament related questions. Suppose the seventh question is based on the Rajya Sabha. So Rajya Sabha has equal powers with the Lok Sabha in matters of power. That is, in matters of creating new all India services, amending the constitution, removal of the government, making the constitutions. Then the four options. Rajya Sabha has equal powers with the Lok Sabha in matters of. This is also one of the questions given in the earlier previous question. That is, so when you read the Lakshmi Count, there is a comparative analysis between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. In what areas that the Lok Sabha has superior powers and in what areas Rajya Sabha has special powers when compared to the counterpart. And in what areas that the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha have equal powers. Very clearly in a tabulated format, this comparison is being given between the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. So based on that comparison, this question is given. So usually we consider that the Rajya Sabha is an inferior question, but it is not necessarily inferior. Rajya Sabha in majority of the cases is enjoying the equal powers with the Lok Sabha. Suppose Prime Minister should be a member of Parliament. If a non-member is appointed as the Prime Minister, he should get elected to the Parliament within 6 months of being appointed as the Prime Minister. Suppose we have P.V. Narasimha Rao as such. When he was appointed as the Prime Minister, he was not a member of Parliament. Devagowda was also not a member of Parliament when he was the Prime Minister. Then they later got elected to the Parliament. P.V. Narasimha Rao got elected to the Lok Sabha. Then example of Devagowda elected to the Rajya Sabha. Meaning, Prime Minister can represent any house. Even Manmohan Singh was also a member of Rajya Sabha when he was Prime Minister twice. both the times, during both the terms, he was only a member of the Rajya Sabha. So, meaning is having almost equal stature on par with the Lok Sabha in most of the matters, except in the matters where it is resulting in censuring the government. Only in matters of censuring the government, Rajya Sabha is not having equal powers on par with the Lok Sabha. So, keeping that in view, this comparative question is given, saying that in what areas Rajya Sabha has equal powers with the Lok Sabha in matters of creating the new all India services. Rajya Sabha has special role, because if a new all India service is to be created, new all India service means IAS or IPS. If a new all India service is to be created, similar to IAS or IPS, suppose in 1966, in addition to IAS and IPS, IFOS was established, Indian Forest Service. And now there is another proposal in the pipeline to create a new all India service, that is All India Judicial Service. And the people who are selected to the All India Judicial Service, they would be holding the post of district judges, minimum district judges. So if this new All India Judicial Service is to be constituted, first Rajya Sabha has to pass a resolution, then Parliament will make the law on that. That is the special status of the Rajya Sabha in creating the new All India Service. In amending the Constitution also. In amending the Constitution, Rajya Sabha enjoys the equal power as the Lok Sabha. Because if an amendment is proposed by the Rajya Sabha can reject it. And there cannot be even joint meeting of the Parliament in getting the approval for the for a constitutional amendment. Now, if you look at the removal of the government, only Lok Sabha has the special powers. Where there is a censuring the government, if there is a provision for that censuring the government, means finding fault with the government, to remove the government. Only Lok Sabha enjoys the special power, not the Rajya Sabha. Cut motion in the budget, a proposal to cut down the budgetary proposal is a cut motion. So even some proposing the cut motion is also a power of the Lok Sabha. So in amending the Constitution, Rajya Sabha has equal power on par with the Lok Sabha. So that is the answer for the question. Rajya Sabha has equal powers with the Lok Sabha in matters of amendment of the Constitution, or in the selection of the ministers. So because ministers are also selected. So ministers are also selected either from the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. And in matters of asking the questions during the question hour, there is a separate question hour in the Lok Sabha, separate question hour in the Rajya Sabha. Ministers have to answer the questions in both the houses. In matters of question hour, in matters of discussion, in matters of the debates over the bills, there are equal powers between the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. So that's how the different questions in the polity section should be answered. The polity questions basically you have to read from NCR, and then you have to focus on the Lakshmikant. And thereby, where in the Lakshmikant or in the NCR, you will be reading about the factual elements. It is useful for the preliminary exam. And for the mains, the focus is on the same facts, but with a commentary and explanatory focus. Same fact is given, whatever the statement is given in the question would be given in the mains as a question. And you would be expected to explain that or comment upon it. Suppose the same question can be given in the mains also. So what would they say? Compare the relative status of Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. Compare the relative status of Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. In what areas that the Rajya Sabha will have the special powers? One statement will be given. Compare the relative role of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Then the further statement is given saying that in what areas that the Rajya Sabha will have a special status. So on those lines, that one has to understand these dimensions related to this aspects. So that is various aspects related, some of the aspects related to the polity. So after polity, there is the other area that you need to focus would be on the journalism. usually most of the people would be finding it difficult for the general essay. So general essay is not so scary thing to be worried about. It's not a matter of scary thing. Because general essay as the term itself is a general essay, it is general essay, not a specialized essay. If it is a specialized essay, you are supposed to have special study about it. Since it is a general essay, you are supposed to have only a generalist perspective on it. So what is the generalist perspective? And how you have to write the answer for the general essay questions. Suppose if I give a question like this. So a general essay should be a general but not a specialized subject. Right. And the example should be pedestrian and simple. Whatever the example that you give in the general essay paper should be pedestrian and very simple, down to earth. Pedestrian is very normal example should be given. Should not give over the top example which cannot be understood by a normal person. You should give very quite common examples while answering a general essay paper. So a general essay, remember to cover 360 degree of an issue, and that is also an important thing. 360 degree issue of an issue, and that is it should cover multiple dimensions. And how to cover the multiple dimension? I will give you a rule of thumb. And what is that rule of thumb? Rule of thumb means something that you should remember with a blind approach. So that rule of thumb, that is to cover all the angles of an issue, consider all the topics of general studies prelims. The general studies prelims syllabus. What are the topics that we have? First topic, first chapter is current affairs, then history, geography, polity, economy, environment, technology. These are the 7 subjects in the general studies paper 1 in the prelims. Take those topics as the fundamentals, right? As a fundamental dimensional analysis, and each topic has to be analyzed from each essay can be analyzed from these 7 dimensions. So what are those 7 dimensions? Suppose if you take an example of an essay, because so suppose the question given is power currents and absolute power currents absolutely. This is the statement given in the general essay. Suppose power currents, if you have the power, you will definitely get corrected. Absolute power currents absolutely means if there is no limit on the power, there will be no limit on the corruption also. Higher the power, higher the possibilities of corruption. Meaning absoluteness means no limits on the power. And this is a universal statement. So some lead guidelines have been given. Lead guidelines are the power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely was a remark made by Lord Acton, the British historian. So this is a lead statement only for your understanding, which he did not write in the actual essay. So it means that the ethical moral values decrease with the steep rise in the power decreases, and the power will further corrupt the person. So a person who has absolute authority will misuse the position. Suppose when you become a collector in the future, you will have your relatives, you will have your friends, you will not cut relations with them. Even if you wanted to remain honest also, because you have the power, the people surrounding you will not let you to remain honest. And this will begin with your parents only, nobody else. If you are married, it will begin with your spouse only. Your spouse or your parents will start making you corrupt. Suppose if you are a brother, an elder brother, you have an elder brother, and first recommendation will come from your mother. Regarding what? Your mother will ask you while serving the lunch or dinner. She will silently ask you, can you find a job for your brother? So you are not a public service commission to find a job. Then what you have? You are only a collector, district collector, but you have the power. Ability to influence is the power, not only the authority. Authority is official position. Power is the ability to influence others. Higher the power, higher the ability to influence. When you are influencing someone, that means that you are manipulating your position. So suppose if you say okay for the proposal made by your mother, you call some private company, CEO of a private company, and you ask him for a job for your brother. You are not accepting any bribe, but the corruption begins here. And further matter, the minutest level of corruption that generally we don't recognize is, suppose if you visit the office late as a district collector, you have to attend the office at 10 o'clock. If you visit the office at 11 o'clock, if you go to the office at 11 o'clock, does anybody ask you about the accountability? Nobody asks. But what you have done by visiting the office late, you are corrupted. Even wasting the time of the office is also a corruption, practice of corruption. Suppose if you have sent a mail, a personal mail, through the office internet, by using the office internet, sending a mail will only consume 25 KB of internet. Even misusing and using the office internet for a personal benefit is also a practice of corruption. Corruption begins there where we do not even realize that what we are doing is a corruption. Sometimes you find in Sudarshan Theatre during the matinee time, several government vehicles are parked over there. What this government vehicle is being parked or doing in the Sudarshan Theatre at that time? Because some government employee would have asked by using this government vehicle. We don't even realize that this using the government vehicle for a personal purpose is a corruption. So corruption will begin at unrealizable situation. So there are the lead statements. Then you have to give some explanation from the different dimensional point of view. So what points are to be covered? So in the introduction, usually in writing the general essay, we have the trouble. What is the trouble that we have in writing the introduction? Now, the trouble that usually we have is the starting trouble. Now, what to start with? So, given the rule of thumb method. So, in the rule of thumb method, covered current affairs. So, let's start with the introduction with the recent issue. That is a current affairs angle among the rule of thumb dimensions. The list of 7 dimensions are there, and first dimension in the rule of thumb is a current affair. So you start the current affair with a recent incident. And suppose power currents, absolute power currents absolutely. For that essay, example is given. In the given question, you may start with the Sri Lankan crisis. The crisis, ongoing crisis in Sri Lanka, because which is an example of how power is corrupted by the ruling family. Almost 7 members of the family are holding the superior powerful posts, including the president, prime minister, and other 5 people. All of the superior positions are held by them, and that itself is showing how corrupt the government is. With that statement, with that example, you can start the essay. So it should not be need not be written only with a quotation. Most of the 99% of the candidates start their essay with a quotation. Examiner will become monotonous by evaluating your paper. Even if your answer is also reflecting the a statement, a quotation. So instead of starting an answer with a quotation, a traditional method of starting the essay, you should break this monotony. How you can break this monotony? By giving an example of a recent example, not an example from the past, a recent example. You can start with a story, or you can start with a quotation. You can start with a recent example like this. The power in Sri Lanka has corrupted, and this corruption is extensive. That is the introductory part. And in the main body, basic conceptualization we have to give. That is, what is power, then what is corruption, and what is absolute. Three words are being used there in the question. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Then you should you should give the meanings of these things. Power is the ability to make things happen despite the resistance. And what is corruption? Corruption is the use of illegitimate methods of performing an act. Unacceptable ways of doing things. And what is absolutism? Absolutism stands for the unrestrained phenomena, unlimitedness, unrestrictedness. Unlimited power is absolute power. Unlimited corruption is absolute corruption. So those meanings should be given. Then you have to give the perspective. Power corrupts absolute, power corrupts absolutely. According to the rule of thumb method. What is the second dimension? Historical dimension, the geographical dimension, economic, political, scientific, technological. So with respect to historical, you can give the examples of Bhasmasura, who had the power to ablaze someone by just keeping the hand on the head of the other person. So he has that power, it can be used for a benefit, for the welfare of the people. But what he did, he misused that power for the personal interest. And Hitler, Mussolini, they were all the historical examples, how they have misused their power. You can also give the example of Putin. He is one of the most powerful executive in the world after the American executive. American president, usually the president of Russia is considered to be the most powerful. And he has the power and he misused the power. The political perspective. Politically, dictatorship is having the absoluteness of the power, resulting in the absoluteness. Then feudalism, hereditariness. They are all the elements of the absolute powers. Then governance perspective. Because in the polity syllabus, you have polity and governance both. So in the governance perspective, you will have administrative corruption. Administrative corruption among the bureaucrats. The Babu culture and the Sahib culture in India. In India, Babus are the bureaucrats. Bureaucrats working at the clerical level are called as the Babu. Bureaucrats working at the IAS level are known as the Sahibs. And this Babu culture and Sahib culture has usurped enormous power into their hands. And because of this usurping of the enormous power into their hands, there was a misuse of the power. They do all those things which are not acceptable for the legitimate governance. Then elite culture in the administrative system. Usually, an IAS officer, for example, an IAS officer or IPS officer, they're together, they're known as what? What is the exam that you are going to prepare for? The exam that you are going to prepare for is civil service exam. And you are going to become a civil servant. And what is the meaning of the civil servant? A servant of the citizens. But a civil servant, instead of treating himself as a servant of the citizens, would assume himself as a boss over the people. He dominates the people with his power to influence. And you can give a lot of examples of this. Suppose an IAS couple in Delhi has forced some people when they went to walking in an open playground. They force the people who are taking the walking around to vacate the place, and they retain the control over that place. So that kind of practices. Just because you are an IAS officer, you cannot make the people to vacate. And as an IAS officer, you have the power to influence others, and you have misused that power. You have used that power for a corrupt practice. Corruption is not necessarily bribe. Bribe is only one of the practices of corruption. According to Kautilya, there are 40 forms of corruption. 2000 years ago, Kautilya has identified 40 forms of corruption. After 2000 years, how many forms of corruption? So, even such misuse of the power for your personal aggrandizement is also a corruption. Coming late to the office is also a corruption. Leaving early from your office is corrupt practice. Just because you think that nobody can question you, you are doing all these things. Demanding for a bribe is only one among those corrupt practices. Seeking favors from someone in the name of your status is also a practice of corruption. So, such corrupt practices are normal, and it is because of the elite culture among the bureaucrats. What is this elite culture? Bureaucracy considers itself as a superior community over the other people. And this superior status, self-declared superior status among them is known as the elite culture. The kind of elite culture is also a governance perspective. And social perspective, domination in the family, casteism, religious fundamentalism, male domination over the female, then federal lordism, Khap Panchayat, there are the examples of social power and the consequent corruption over the society. The geographical perspective, feudalism in the states like Bihar, Haryana, West Bengal. Geographically, you can identify several parts of the country where you can clearly visualize these dimensions of the domination, corrupt practices because of the powerful landlordism in the states like Bihar, Haryana, and West Bengal. Tendencies of brutal power display in these countries like Pakistan, Middle East, and North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. This is a geographical perspective. Then you can go for the environmental domination of man on other biological species. Man is only one of the creatures, human being. Man means human being. Human being is only one of the creatures. And this largest creature, biggest creature among other creatures, the intellectual creature, he is dominating others because of the ability to influence his, noetic power. Noetic power, the power of knowledge. The power of knowledge made the human being to dominate other biological species. Then you can also give the examples of the economic perspective. That is displacement due to the development, industrialization and excessive infrastructure development. Then from the cultural point of view, how power can ruin the system. Suppose sports authorities misusing the power to select the sports. Several sports persons are being selected by the sports authorities just because their parents they have some influence, power of influence. And cultural associations corrupted in giving the awards also. Even when giving the awards, suppose Bharat Ratna, Padma Bhushan, Padma Bhushan, any other award, sometimes there is also a possibility of influence. And technical perspective, IT is the new oil today. Information technology is the new oil because during the 1980s, oil was the source of wealth. But today, information is the source of wealth. Tomorrow, cobalt is the new oil. Cobalt means that is used in the batteries, and the batteries which we use in the cell phones or laptops or in the tablets, and heavily they are also used in the electric cars. So in the future, oil will be the cobalt. So 70% of the vehicles in the future will be run on the cobalt batteries. Today we are using the lithium batteries, lithium-ion batteries. Lithium-ion will be replaced with the cobalt in the future, and the future will be the source of wealth in the future will be the cobalt. So now, as of now, information is the new oil because it is the source of wealth. And those who have control over the information will be the powerful people. Therefore, we have the topmost powerful people in this world are the founders of Google company, the founder of Microsoft company, the founder of Facebook Meta, and the founder of Twitter. And what they are doing, they are all doing with the founders and directors of the Apple company. So this Apple, Microsoft, then Meta, and Google. So these are the agencies which are dominating the world wealth. Suppose if you take Apple, the total revenue of the Apple, revenue generation by the Apple is almost double the total revenue generated by 10 countries in the world, including America. Higher the revenue than the GDP of the America. So that is the nature of the wealth, and which is the source of this wealth is the information, nothing but the information. So those who hold this information will enjoy the wealth. These are actually enjoying it. These are the people who are actually enjoying the power in the entire world. They are having the ability even to influence the chief executives in the world. And the misuse in the form of morphing and hacking can also be possible. Corruption of information is possible even in the form of morphing, hacking, and other things. And the companies that have made now, they are all imposing sanctions on Russia today. Meaning, they are in a position to impose sanctions on Russia means what? They're so powerful, they're influencing the policies of the government. One of the powerful governments in the world. So how they're imposing the sanctions? Suppose Apple company stopped all the exports to Russia. Government of America has not asked Apple company to stop the exports. And Meta has withdrawn the services. That is, Facebook services have been withdrawn. Twitter has stopped the services. So how this be, and Microsoft has also stopped the Microsoft Cloud. The cloud services have been stopped by the Microsoft. Though the government of America has not asked these countries to withdraw their services from Russia, they're just believing that Russia is doing something inhuman, and so therefore they have stopped all these practices. So that is the range of power that they are misusing. Though it is not a government policy to ask them to stop their services, but still they have done it. So those who are having information are the powerful people in this earth. So information is the energy. Information is like energy. It is the energy as well as it is like energy. Like energy, you cannot create information. You cannot destroy the information. You can only transform the information from one form to another form. And those who have this capability to transform this energy from one form to another form will be the richest people, will be the wealthiest people, will be the most powerful people. And because of this power, those who are controlling the information, they are mining the data. They are mining the wealth from this data. Generally, we talk about the data mining. Those who could able to mine this data will become the wealthiest people in this world. So from those dimensions, this concept has to be understood. So the misusing of this power is always possible, and then you have to talk about a way forward. So after giving the way forward, conclude it. So way forward is eternal vigilance of the people will be the source of protecting their liberties and preventing the misuse of power. People have to be vigilant every time. A civil society activism, creating a civic culture among the people. What is a civic culture? Civic culture means a culture to respect each other, not to dominate others. Usually the human being having a nature of dominating others with the power. And instead of dominating others, you have to develop this culture. Because in any human culture, it became a DNA of the human being to dominate others. Father dominates the children, an elder brother dominates the younger brother, and parents dominate the children, husband dominates the wife. This kind of domination became a part of the DNA. This is all because of the cultural practices, right from the beginning of the civilization. So this culture needs to be modified into what is called as civic culture. And what is that civic culture? That is a culture to respect each other. Every human being should recognize the other human being as a human being. That is a tendency of respecting them. So that would actually will create a civic culture. And finally, in conclusion, what we should say is, power doesn't corrupt. Power by itself will not corrupt the people. But what happens? The power holder will be corrupt. The person holding the power will actually corrupt. Power by itself, by nature, is not having a tendency to corrupt. It is the people who are having the power will get corrupted. So a kind of futuristic perspective should be shown in the conclusion. So that is how we have to, analyze things and by this analysis. So we can conclude, make a conclusion that. So anything asked by the UPSC is based on. You need not say that it is an unpredictable public service commission. If you analyze the previous year question, you can guess the question, and you can present the answer in such a way that is required for the UPSC. In the prelims, anyway, there will be only one answer for every question. It would be based on NCERT analysis. In the mains, UPSC is expecting a specific answer from you, and that should be based on the analysis of the previous year question. Then the practice, you have to make the practice. You cannot command the art of answer writing in one day. You should at least practice 50 journalists. you should at least practice 500 questions in the GS and 500 questions in the optional paper. And even in selecting the optional, I will give you a simple procedure as given you in the the workbook you being given to that is to select the optional. Suppose if you are having a confusion regarding the optional selection, so optional selection should be based on from the over 50 subjects. There are 50 around subjects given by the UPSC. Among those 50 subjects, some of them are based on the literature subjects are there, and some of the subjects are humanities and science subjects are there. So, 25 science subjects, social subjects, and another 25 literature subjects, like Telugu literature, Tamil literature, and etc. And among these subjects, we can classify those subjects into two types: popular subjects and domain subjects. Popular subjects are the subjects that are opted by maximum, like public administration, sociology, anthropology, Telugu literature, geography, and PSIR, that is political science. And domain subjects, any subject that you have studied in your graduation is a domain subject. Suppose if your domain subject is also a popular subject, you will be the luckiest. Domain subject means if you are a BTech graduate, opting engineering subject will be challenging. But if you have studied BA with public administration, it is also a popular subject. It is gaining more popularity in the recent time, for the last 3 years. In 2019, public administration, the candidate taken the public administration stood first rank. And quite a good number of people are getting the ranks with public administration in sociology and anthropology. A subject will become popular when it is opted by maximum number of people, because the candidates are getting selected with it. And moreover, public administration has compatibility, lot of compatibility with the general studies also. So then, this is based on a rational analysis model of Herbert Simon. Herbert Simon is an economist and who has got Nobel Prize for this decision-making model called rational analysis model in 1978. And there are 3 stages in selecting the option. One is identification of the problem. You have to identify several options. There are 50 options. Reduce them to popular subjects and the domain subjects. Usually candidates will go by the popular subjects. And public administration is one such popular subject. Political science, anthropology, sociology, Telugu literature. Then after identifying this, then go to the second stage. In the second stage, you development stage. So development stage means where you need to find out the merits and demerits of each subject. What is the merit? Merit means how many number of people are getting the selection with this particular subject. Maximum number of people are getting selected. That's a merit. Demerit means people are not selecting the optional. Question paper is difficult. Syllabus is not able to be understood. Difficulty in making a compatibility with the general studies. If there is no compatibility, it's a demerit. There is a maximum compatibility for the subjects like public administration and sociology. It's a merit. After analyzing these merits and demerits, then analyze the syllabus based on that, review the previous questions. Based on that, the analysis has to be done. Analysis of merits and demerits. Then the third stage, that is choice. When everything is ready in front of you, merits and demerits are already in front of you. Then you choose that subject which is more meritorious, having less demerits. So then optional select based on that analysis. So I recommend you to choose the optional subjects which are popular in that. Popular subject, maximum number of candidates are getting through them. Like the subjects like public administration, sociology, anthropology, they are the most popular subjects. So if you choose public administration, that would fetch you almost to the extent of 500 marks from the general studies also. 500 marks for the public administration, another 500 marks in the GS also covered. So all these optional classes we would be starting from Wednesday, that is from 27th of this month. Optional classes and the general studies classes are also started from Wednesday. So if you have any question,